All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming to our 20th annual Povich Symposium, which is obviously about soccer in the USA and where it stands and where it's going, and we're just really excited to just talk about it and to hear more about it. So Mark Hyman, Povich Center Director, is going to tell you a little bit more.
Thank you, Kate, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the annual Povich Symposium. This is our first soccer symposium, and it really couldn't be more timely. There's the approaching FIFA Men's World Cup, a global spectacle with an audience in the hundreds of millions. It's coming to the U.S. next summer, and it kicks off in, 48 hours? And barely 10 miles from this campus with the World Cup draw. And there's more that's new and newsworthy tonight. A few weeks ago, our friend Don Garber in Major League Soccer announced a flip of the schedule so that starting in 2027, the MLS regular season will align with top European leagues. And then a final surprise, this one actually across the street from Knight Hall. Sasho Cirovski and the Terps men's soccer team are fighting for a national championship. We may talk about that tonight. So thank you to Sasho and to Don for the breaking news, and to Cobi, Taylor, Steve, Emily, and John, thank you for making this a truly memorable night for the Povich Center and for this audience. Every year, the symposium reminds us that the Povich Center is not just a center, it's a community. And that community is on the move. Next month, 24 of our students are traveling to London to report on the impact Americans are having on professional soccer in the UK. And two of those student journalists, Mira and Trevor, are here to introduce our panels tonight. Not quite yet, but they will be here on stage. In London, our reporters will be in the field with notepads, cameras, video gear, and audio equipment, capturing stories in every medium that we teach. We'll publish their work on Capital News Service and perhaps in partnership with professional news organizations. This is what the Povich Center does best. We put students into the world to tell the stories that matter, and we give them the tools, the mentorship, and the confidence to do it at a high level. To all our alums, parents, donors, and friends who support us, thank you. Your belief in our mission sustains this work and expands what's possible for the next generation of sports journalists. 2026 is the 15th anniversary of the Povich Center, and we intend to celebrate. More to come. Finally, thank you to my colleagues at Merrill College for making this a very special night. Special shout-outs to Kate Yanchulis, the tireless assistant director of the Povich Center, to Nathan Stevens of Merrill College's broadcast faculty, and to the esteemed professor of the practice, Kevin Blackystone. Deep appreciation also to Victoria Black, Brendan Hartlove, Josh Land, Maria Lee, Kate DeBlasis, Verna Gibson, and the many student volunteers here tonight. And now I'd like to introduce Rafael Lorente, Dean of Merrill College of Journalism.
Thank you, Mark. Welcome, folks. Welcome to the 20th, yes, the 20th annual Povich Symposium. I'm not going to talk about soccer, and I'm not going to take too much time up here. I'm going to let the people who know what they're talking about do that. But I want to talk about the Povich Center for a moment. So over 20 years, the Povich Symposium has featured discussions with folks like Bob Costas, Christine Brennan, Claire Smith, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, and of course, the great George Solomon, the Povich Center's founding director. There are many blessings that make me proud to be the dean of the Philip Merrill College of Journalism. The people in the mission come to mind. One of those blessings every day is the Povich Center. Unlike any other center of its kind, the Povich Center takes sports beyond the score of the game and beyond the made-for-television squabbles. Not that those aren't important. As some of you know, I have some strong opinions about the college football playoff rankings, but I'm going to keep them to myself today. Notre Dame. Like its namesake, Shirley Povich, the Povich Center makes us think. Think about critical issues that affect the games we love and the world we live in. These topics speak to us as sports fans, as citizens of a democracy, and as humans who are curious about the world around us. The Povich Center elevates our conversations. But it does something else I care deeply about. The center teaches tomorrow's journalists, sports and otherwise, how to report and tell great stories. Mark Hyven, Kevin Blackistone, Kate Yanchulis, Derek Willis, Joe Yasheroff, Sandy Beniski, Alex Flum, Rose DePaula, and so many others, some of you are here, are preparing a new generation to ask tough questions, even when those in power don't want to answer them. I say sports or otherwise because it doesn't matter whether these students cover sports or politics or leave journalism for another field. They will leave here as critical thinkers. They will be good for the health of a self-governing society. I want to tell you a really quick story. On the first day of classes this semester, I bumped into the aforementioned Derek Willis. Derek is one of our terrific data journalism professors who teaches a class called Sports Data Analysis and Visualization. On that first day, I asked Derek what he was doing, and he says, I'm going to have my students shut down their computers, put away their phones, and they're going to watch number 11 seeded Loyola take on number 3 Michigan. Some of you remember this game, right? Pretty fantastic game. Just weeks after Loyola's star, Hank Gathers, had died, David took down Goliath. And I looked at Derek and I said, what does this have to do with sports data? Well, of course, it has everything to do with sports data because there's patterns and there's data in what Loyola was able to do to Michigan. And he was going to introduce these students, some of whom are afraid of data because they think it's really scary, how to learn it in a way that they were really going to appreciate. Those students will go out and talk to others, and other students will take that class. That's pretty cool. It's also cool that Mark Hyman is taking 24 students to Britain next month. It's also cool that Mark's class this semester interviewed the owner of the Baltimore Orioles for an oral history project about the building of the ballpark that we all love, Camden Yards. I could go on. All of these classes and stories are about sports, but they're also about learning how to find patterns using data, and they're about international business and cultural forces, and about the lobbying and politics involved in building a huge sports stadium. So I'll leave you with a request because I'm the dean and it's my job. If you like what you see here tonight, or if you're impressed that college students can travel to Mississippi, Africa, or London to write stories, produce pieces for the PBS NewsHour, or create feature-length documentaries, they've done all that stuff. Please consider helping Mark out and contributing to the work that he and his colleagues do. You'll be making a difference in the lives of terrific young people, many of whom could not take advantage of these great opportunities, and these young people will change the world. Thank you. I hope you enjoy tonight. And speaking of these young people, it's my job to introduce Trevor to come up here and begin to introduce the panel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Trevor Gomez, junior journalism major from Columbia, Maryland. I'm excited to introduce our first panel featuring Don Garber, commissioner of Major League Soccer, and moderator John Ourand, a veteran sports business reporter for Puck. This segment will also be featured in an episode of his podcast, The Varsity. Thank you.
Thank you. Where's Sasho? Let's go, Sasho. All right. Big game this weekend. So this is the capital of soccer right now. And this weekend, there's the World Cup draw in addition to Maryland playing. The international soccer community really has just, it's descended on DC. You're here, obviously. You have the MLS final coming up this weekend. Messi in Miami against Vancouver down in Miami. Are you able to tap in to the celebration that's going on right now, or is it just too much going on with the final coming up?
Well, first of all, let me start by thanking you, John, and thanking the university and the program. I knew George very well, and I remember when the center was formed, George, who was a soccer-friendly editor, there are a few of those, and he was the grandfather of Steve, who is really one of the great soccer journalists in our country. So I'm happy to be here, John. This is a big moment, and I think it's the beginning of capturing all of the momentum and excitement of what global football, global soccer can be, and all the energy that's been going on at so many different levels, John. And we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot about the media part of it. But I've been doing this for a very long time. I like to say when I started, I'm not quite sure what I was thinking. I left a pretty good job, and MLS was pretty fledgling. And then it went down, a bit of a rabbit hole for a couple of years. So I kind of look at these great moments as milestones for what everybody who cares about the game, John, has been dreaming of, which is establishing our country as a true soccer nation and having all of the pieces come together and harness the passion of fans and try to convince, as you can imagine, the political folks that are supporting both the World Cup, but building stadiums and creating green fields for people to play. And it's all capped off by what will start on Friday with the draw, thousands and thousands of people from around the world. Appropriately, our State of the League, 30th season, will happen on tomorrow night down in D.C., and there'll be hundreds and hundreds of media people there. The draw will be spectacular. They just announced the talent for that. And then we got a little game on Saturday, which I think will really capture a lot of attention and bring even more awareness to MLS.
So you know what I love about covering your league is you're wrapping up your 30th season. I mean, you've been around for a while, since for 30 years. I happen to cover like the NFL and MLB and the NBA. It feels like you're still a startup in some manner. Give me the state of your league. Like, how does it feel internally?
It is a startup, and it's rare. We're in a university setting, and people thinking about how are they going to build their future, and how's the center going to raise money to be able to expand, the outreach for all the great young minds that are being educated here. We're unusual. There are very few 30-year startups. And I've had a lot of conversations with our owners about that. I'm kind of like a VC CEO, but have been in the job way longer than most founders are. Generally, you're kicked out way earlier, and they bring in somebody that will be a proper CEO.
This curse is about being as well liked as you are.
Yeah,
I think.
or at least you got to keep the owners who hate you away from the ones who haven't really figured it out yet, And there are lots of them, so you just keep them in different rooms, and it's worked out. But John's very true, and I think we'll get into it when we talk about Apple. We'll get into it when we talk about building stadiums that had not been built before in this country, and thinking about MLS as a commercial driver to grow the sport that benefits all of the different soccer stakeholders. And it's very difficult to have to operate as if your next day is your first day, and to have people that have been in this job a long time. Most of our senior executives have been around since the league's founding. That's highly unusual. Hank Paulson's one of our owners, and he once said to me after a long board meeting, said, I hear you've been the commissioner for 10 years. I've sat on a lot of boards. That's my limit. When are you leaving? And that was 16 years ago. And I said, Hank, you'll go into the category for those guys who...
I don't want you to talk to that guy over there.
So I think it's a great question. People don't ask me that very often. I think it's motivating, it's exciting. It creates innovation because you don't get steeped in tradition. All that being said, the NFL goes from strength to strength. I spent almost 17 years there. It's amazing to me how a league that can be that mature, a business that could be that mature, continues to take risk and innovate, thinks about their business differently, getting investment at media partners as opposed to taking rights fees and going about and coming up with stadium funding with their debt facility that nobody else had really thought of. So we can learn from the other leagues. John, you cover them all, and you've been around a long time. I like being a little engine that could, but being old enough to not have to worry about whether we're going to, be able to cover all of our obligations.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because that was leading into my next question about the NFL, of course, continues to grow, as do all those other leagues. So with that knowledge, that of course you're always growing, where is MLS right now in terms of the state of its growth?
Way further along than we thought we would be, because you're still in a...
You would be in 1994, or then...
Well, again, it's appropriate for those who don't know, MLS was founded out of the 1994 World Cup. So we're going to talk a lot over the next weeks about, if not for the obligation that U.S. Soccer made to FIFA, there was no MLS when young guys, pre-Cobi and pre-Taylor, and maybe when, Sasho, you were thinking about being pro, the World Cup team in 1994, they were training in some facility in Southern California. They had no training grounds. They barely had uniforms. It's amazing that we did reasonably well. And here we are sitting here today with 30 teams and 26 stadiums and billions and billions and billions of dollars of investment in the league, and obviously millions and millions of fans. John, the way I look at it is I think that it's a generational, the lifetime value of a fan, things that you all will be thinking about. What's the lifetime value of a consumer? We're now a business that's gone through its first generation, that have kids that have never grown up without MLS in their lives. So you have the ability for parents to take kids to games and see those kids wearing jersey, or a kid as we call them, and identifying with a player, going to a youth program, and having that DNA connectivity that drives and has driven the NHL and the NBA and MLS and MLB. And all of them, John, have gone through different phases of growth. I had lunch with Gary Bettman the other day, and I remember sitting in the offices of the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. We were convincing MLSE to buy an MLS team. By the way, it was $10 million when they bought it in 2006-07. And the CEO said, I got to take a break because Gary Bettman's having a press conference. They're going to have a lockout. And Gary, over that period of time to where we are now, has built a great media property, a lot of great stadiums, teams that are now average value of $2 billion. So as we go through the ebbs and flows, I try to remind a new version of owners. The industrialists are leaving, and the new breed of owners, you write about them a lot, are coming in. Just, this is a long-term play. It's a generational play. Be patient, be bold, be courageous, be willing to invest a lot of money. Soccer is the growth sport in our country. I have no doubt about that.
I'm interested that in your first couple of answers, you shouted out Roger Goodell, you shouted out Gary Bettman. Soccer is unique, but how much do you lean on what these other leagues are doing to make decisions on MLS?
That's a good question,
Thank
John.
you. I do this for a living.
Yeah, man. Less than you think on some areas, but more than you would think on others. Clearly around COVID, about sports betting, what is happening, you might ask about that in prediction markets. The NHL just did their deal, which kind of surprised us all, and that couldn't be more timely with everything Kaushi did over the last 24 hours. So I think, I like to say, well, if it's good enough for them, it ought to be good enough for us. They have much more congressional oversight. Baseball has its antitrust exemption. I like being sort of over here and not having the same level of scrutiny that we might have 20, 40, 50, or 100 years from now. But we do talk. We get together now and again. Roger's at the head of the class, and regardless of how old he might be or how many years he's been in the job, and then it kind of goes downhill. But that being said, I'm the second longest serving commissioner after Gary, and that surprises me. When I came in, I was 40 years old-ish. I knew nothing about how to run a league, really. David Stern once took me and put his arm around me and say, hey, kid, just don't do what I say and don't talk a lot, and you're going to be fine. And I used to talk to David a lot. He was an opinionated guy, and I respected.
I bet David had a few more four-letter words in there. Recently, I've been writing a lot and reading a lot about MLS 3.0, which seems to be coming from the league about sort of getting ready for the next stage of growth. What does that look like?
You know, again, I'm going to bring it back to the other leagues. And I'm a fan of all sports, and I worked in one sport for a really long time. Think of how long it took for all of us who care about baseball to do the things that baseball did that have made the game way more fan-friendly for a whole new generation of fans that have kind of grown up with the game a bit. Maybe they weren't following it as much. Their parents weren't, they weren't playing Little League, et cetera, et cetera. The other leagues don't innovate that much because they're so mature, John. The NBA has their season tournament. We launched the Leagues Cup. We play an in-season tournament against the Mexican League, and we do it in the middle of our season. We're constantly innovating as a business. A, we can. B, we have to, because we're competing, unlike almost all of them, in a global market where the rest of the football world is very established. They are the NFL, if you will, of the sporting world. So we constantly have to take a sit back, work a lot on strategy, have the right planning in place, sit down and have strategy groups with our owners, all who are best in class and have run complicated businesses, and they're very engaged in MLS. 3.0 is just the next iteration of where we need to be. We need to get closer to the international standard. Changing our calendar is a massive undertaking. We have 10 teams in the northern part of North America. We've got teams in Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal and Chicago and Minnesota. We're going to be playing games there in February. So imagine what those owners are thinking about what that's going to be like, and then having to go and figure out why that makes sense, aligning with the international standard. We have 3 new stadiums coming on in Chicago, Miami in March, and New York City. If you haven't seen that, we'll have a stadium next door to Citi Field, billion-dollar project, so that'll be our 29th stadium. And all these things will position us post-World Cup to, A, ride a little bit of that momentum, get a little rocket fuel, and then hopefully build MLS. And the tailwinds of that will affect college soccer and hopefully lift up the women's game even more. Then that game continues to grow. The league's doing really well. If you believe in the globalization and where demographics are shifting in our country, regardless of politics, soccer is moving in the right direction. And that's why our teams are valued at over $20 billion or $21 billion collectively, a far cry from the $5 million that Robert Kraft and a couple other guys invested not that long ago.
You referenced the calendar shift. Have you ever been in Minnesota in February? I was there for the Super Bowl. That was the coldest I've ever been.
I was too, and I, in a previous life, the commissioner said, and I was an event guy, we're going to have a cold weather Super Bowl, and we have this thousands and thousands of fans going to be hanging out outside the stadium, and I was the guy that came up with the idea for the NFL Experience, which we did indoors for the first year in Minnesota as a way to kind of have a little bit of a theme park because you had all those people out in the cold. By the way, our first game in Minnesota, when they came into our league several years ago, was played in snow. It was pretty cool, and Atlanta played Minnesota. The fans were throwing snowballs. You have to be thoughtful. Our fields are going to have to be heated. We're going to have to deal with a whole bunch of schedule shifts. We've got now 30 teams. We can play a lot of the early games in the South. We have 3 teams in Texas and several in Florida and Charlotte and the like. So we'll figure it out.
Does August in Austin equate February in?
I love this guy. So John, when
Say that again. Can we clip that?
Minnesota, Chicago, and Toronto, and those guys, I'm saying, like, have you been to a game in Miami in August? So when I just another fun story. We have this Dos a Cero thing we do many years ago. We never beat Mexico, and our national team, we used to take them to Columbus, and in February. And we thought that would be a really good idea because all these folks who are used to playing in warm weather would come up and it would be like 20 degrees and they'd be wearing gloves and long pants and all that stuff, and it would work really, really well. And those games were really cold, and I'd say, man, why do they do that? It's really cold in February in Columbus, let alone in Toronto. But, ask Messi what it's like to play from Barcelona and play in August in Dallas or in Houston. Those are stadiums that are not dome stadiums. So you just got to manage it. Running a sports league is really hard, and you just got to keep your eye on the ball. You got to get focused. You got to get your owners together. You got to make tough decisions. You got to have capital that is long. And so far, it's working pretty well.
So take us into the owners' meetings. Is this something that you were pushing for? Is this something that you sense that the majority of owners
On
were
the calendar change?
on the calendar change? Yeah.
As a, we should have like a roadshow, John. That process was the most difficult process that I think that we had as a league in our history, because it was complicated and it affected revenue. How's a season ticket holder will they buy season tickets if they might not want to go in the winter? What's your player strategy if you're going to have to play in Minnesota versus playing in Atlanta? What do you do with your sponsors? We had a summer competition less in the summer, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll get to media, John. We're also playing our playoffs up against the SEC championship. We had our playoff game up against the Duke game the other day. We can't compete in this time of the year against all of the major leagues and intend to be able to be successful with the postseason. At the end of the day, it's a media business, number one, and we've got to fix that. And also, we're aligned with the international calendar to buy and sell players. We sold $200 million worth of players this year. And we do that with calendars windows that aren't aligned with the rest of the world. We're selling players in the middle of our playoffs. It makes no sense. We had our group work and create pods with our owners. We hired a consulting group out of the UK that, talking about data, did tons of data analytics and weather analytics and how do we work with the algorithm on the schedule if we had to move games. It took us a year, literally a year, to create all of the work through owner groups with chief soccer officers and with our chief business officers. The first vote, I kind of knew I had the vote, but I know Steve's here, there are probably not that many other media people here. We didn't announce it because we wanted to be sure, we wanted to get it pretty close to unanimous, and it was. And they're great partners. They're partners in the boardroom, and they're fierce competitors on the field, and we just laid out why this made sense, and hopefully it works. And if it doesn't, MLS 4.0.
Sooner than we think. You mentioned that this is a media business. It's good to get into my sort of pet project. You're going to stop saying I'm asking good questions now that I'm bringing up Apple, I think.
Oh, you know what? I do this a lot, John, and most of the time the questions aren't great. So.
You just redid your deal with Apple. It's going to end now 3 years earlier. It was, in my opinion, a great deal that you struck because it comes in front of the paywall. Everything comes in front of the paywall. Why did you do that?
Well, for those in the room, I told John we were going to have fun. You probably weren't the biggest fan of the deal when we announced it, and we respected that. It's part of why we recognized when you do bold things that anticipate the future, you got to break some glass. And those that are traditional thinkers, and I'm not saying you are, but the industry didn't quite understand what we were trying to achieve. So let me go to that. And I'm going to bring it back to Puck as a subscriber and an avid reader. Where was Puck? Where were you 4 years ago? We were consuming all of the things that matter to us in the industry. Maybe when we got Vanity Fair online, before that, we needed to read it on a regular basis in a magazine. There were things that were popping up, and now we have, for those in the entertainment, media, and sports industry, a must-read newsletter that gives us information that we weren't getting in a way that matters to us. I feel the same way about what was going on with broadcast media, John. Nobody talks about the fact that all of the major leagues have the 5 major leagues. There are many other leagues, and the NWSL, I think, is a major league. But I think what differentiates the major leagues is local broadcasts. Every single game was broadcast. So when you're in DC, it was on the regional. When you're in Vancouver, it was on the local TSN affiliate, TSN 7 or whatever it might be. Every single game. We have 600 games. 500 of them were local. And we saw 4 or 5 years ago what is happening now. I just saw your podcast, which we listened to on the train, what's happening to the RSNs. And we saw
Nothing good.
Nothing good. But John, we saw that. And we needed to not just renew 100 games. We had 30 with ESPN, 30 with Univision, and we had 30 with Fox. We had some international distribution that we pieced together. But we had 500 games that were not going to continue. We certainly weren't going to get paid. We wanted to aggregate all that into a global package that anybody, anywhere without blackouts can go with the touch of a button and capture the excitement of Major League Soccer. What was criticized was you're walking away from the ubiquity of having a Red Bull game that was on MSG. Maybe 20,000 people were watching that game on a good day. So what we were looking to do is have a Red Bull New York City game be treated as if it was on ESPN, no differently than Columbus, Cincinnati, or San Jose playing LA. Every single game is available the exact same way, same number of cameras. People like Taylor and other great broadcasters are broadcasting those games and aggregating it in what Apple, Eddie Q, who you know well, believed would be the ultimate disruption of the sports media business, which was direct-to-consumer global subscription service. And we believed it. Ultimately, they were not able to achieve that with other leagues because it requires exclusivity. If you know that you can get something from anywhere for free, not free, cable subscription, satellite subscription, a streaming subscription, then ultimately that would inhibit your ability to sell the subscription. Moving to Apple TV takes us from what is 1.3, 1.4-ish subscribers to an audience of what could be, they don't announce that number, but it's really, really big. It's tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of people. So eliminating that paywall, which changed our deal, gives us the ability to have our games broadcast globally, again through a streaming service, doing linear where we think it makes sense, John. So it's a good deal for us. It's a good deal for Apple. The shortened deal makes sense for us. We had a deal, as I talked about publicly, that was a revenue share. That's gone away, so we gave something up. We're going to get something back, a shorter deal. I am super bullish about what our media opportunity is, and I'm really bullish that all the disruption, all of the transformation of what's going on in the media space will settle in, as it always had. When radio was broadcasting horse racing, and then the beginnings of baseball, and then the NFL on Monday Night Football, and then the advent of cable and satellite and red zone and all of that, it always disrupts, but it always settles down, and live sports is always a winner.
In about 5 minutes, we're going to go to questions from the audience. So think of your questions. When you have one, raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone over to you.
John, do you agree with that? Because I want to know what you're going to write about what I said.
Well, here's what. There are two things on that worry me for the league a little bit. One is, by going to a streaming service as early as you did, you cut off a lot of casual fans that were maybe watching the college basketball game and then sticking through to watching MLS. Or I'm thinking more of the national, Fox and ESPN. And even today, still broadcast TV and cable TV still provide, at least in the U.S., more viewers. And then secondly, when you did the deal, I would have expected Apple to have a sports strategy that would have supported a lot of your games. And until they did the F1 deal, I felt like you were sort of like out there alone, which would have frustrated me.
Yeah, I won't comment on that because I know this is a public forum. but I understand how, if you were me, you would have been frustrated by that. So John, I guess, and this is super important. Our attendance has grown every year we had the Apple deal. Our revenues have grown every year we've had the Apple deal. Our ratings this year finally have released them yesterday or the day before, up 29% season long. We had 700,000 people watching our playoffs on average. Our 3.7 weekly, remember, you all know this, there isn't a normal rating service for what we're doing because we're the only one doing it. The only thing we could do is take our audience for the week of 12 games that we have and put them together, unlike the one basketball game or one baseball game or an All-Star game or a World Series. We're putting on 600 games, and all those games are treated exactly the same. But our revenues have grown, our team values have grown, our audience has grown, our attendance has grown, our expansion interest has grown. So the real question is, when the vast majority of young people, and this is our audience, are watching streaming services, as you've said, by far, way more than they're watching linear, because they're cable nevers. We're speaking to the audience that are not being lost because they may or may not be watching network television because they don't have the ability to get it. I would rather go to YouTube, and you talked a lot about that, or Julie talked a lot about that. all of the things that are happening with these new services, as streaming services are becoming the linear and broadcast services of the past, it's changing, and we are right in the middle of all of that in ways that have been good for us, albeit way different, and certainly criticized, but we got thick skin in the soccer business, guys.
You do have thick skin, and Dan Cornerbonch, the master. I should know this off the top of my head. 3 years, is that when your media rights are up?
Yeah,
Okay.
2.5 years. Yeah, it's complicated because it's halfway through our new sprint season, but yes, and I'm bullish on Apple. I think they'll be there, and I think this new strategy they have with F1 and baseball is going to be great for them.
As you look at the media market now, when your rights do come up, how do you see the market, especially vis-a-vis your league?
So back when we looked at the renewal of our rights, we had a 3-year runway of taking back all of our local rights from the clubs and putting it into a bundle. Then we had 18 months to go out to the market. Sitting here today, and we knew that the RSN disruption was happening, John. We knew it, and it turned out to be true. I can't tell you what the media business is going to look like 3 years from now. I don't think we're going to follow people like you, honestly, and others that are looking at and talking to and speaking to those that are the folks that are making these decisions. But I don't know where we're going to be. It could be that the broadcast networks are more consolidation. You've talked about what's going on with WBD and having that potentially bought by a streamer. So maybe the market is going to look so different from where we are today. But I'm happy I'll be back in the market earlier.
We are ready for some questions. I'm going to lob one last one. I can't believe I've had you up here for about a half hour. I think I mentioned Messi once. How big has Messi been for the league?
Yeah, it's been fun, John. I'll tell you, there's been a guy from the New York Times is writing a book about it. He is a unicorn. He's truly a unicorn. I could say this not as the commissioner, but really as a fan. He enjoys playing the game for the right reasons, which the legendary athletes do. He's happy, his family's happy. He won't come out of a game. I'm sitting with our guys. We have a little chat thing on Saturday nights. You're not on it, Taylor, but every once in a while, I'll zip him a note saying, "What did you just say? Are you kidding me? I'm going to have to talk to you on Monday." But, he won't come out of a game, John. So if you're 38 years old and you've got World Cup qualifying and you've got the Leagues Cup and you've got the Champions League and they're winning 4-0, I know I was a coach, I'd say, Lee, why don't you just take a little break and, maybe have a Celsius, one of our great sponsors, but he won't come out, John. So that speaks to that Michael thing. It takes 10,000 reps to be able to be the great one. He loves being here in America. He loves our league. We're going to have a big event with him on Saturday. I'm just overjoyed watching him. It's a thrill to see history happen and live it. I try to remind the people who are working is that what's it like working in a league? You got to do it every day. It's not so much fun all the time. You've got a lot of things and fires that you got to put out. But we got to take a step back and think that we're living in a world where in our league, in Major League Soccer, this guy decided to come to America. He decided to come to our league. We didn't have to go chase him. He decided to come, and he loves it. And he brought a couple of his friends. That worked out okay. And, they're going to build a new stadium, and that stadium is going to be spectacular. I don't know. I'm sure that would have happened without Leo, but, it's been very, very, very special. I'm happy for everybody. If you love the game, the guy is truly a unicorn, and I'm happy to have him.
You know who dominates my social feed? It's not Messi. It's his bodyguard.
Yeah.
That runs up and down the field. I want to do a story on that guy.
You should, John. But at one point he was running around, and at times it's really not fun. We are the disciplinary arm of the league. People forget that we're both running. You talk to Adam and others about business and about media and growing. We are the regulatory arm of the league. We have discipline and governance and suspending players. Imagine suspending Messi for not competing in our All-Star game. He wasn't that happy about that. He's never been suspended ever. But we got to do what we need to do, including we can't have his bodyguard running around. That being said, the guy is a really cool guy. He's special. He and Leo are very good friends. I love seeing him. He's got a great social media following. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. He's fun. Somebody should do a piece on him.
Do we have questions? We got one, actually one back there. Please say your name and where you're from.
My name is Rui Ferreira Nagy. I'm play for Bethesda Soccer Club, U17, and I had a question. I was wondering, as a player, that's why I've interest in this question. How come the level is so much more advanced in Europe compared to the level of academies in the MLS Next? Because I've seen a lot of times, like individual games, American academies are able to compete with the European academies and win games, but then in the end, in the high ranks of football, Premier League, Serie A, different leagues, you don't see many Americans, even though in individual games, they are able to compete at that level. And I was just wondering, why is it that way on the developmental side?
I think it's a great question. Our U17s got further than they have, and then they didn't get any further, and that's been frustrating. It happens with our Olympic team. We get to a certain point where we can compete against some countries, but not the best countries when it comes to elite player competitions. MLS invests over $100 million a year in our academy system in MLS Next and MLS Next Pro. So I'll talk about this in my State of the League on Thursday in DC. That was 0 5 years ago. So our academies are able to compete with the best academies around the world. Messi is going to have 6 academies come. We're going to announce that next week from the best clubs in the world. The Inter Miami Academy will be able to stand toe-to-toe with Real Madrid or at the U14 or U15 level. It's what happens next. And that is where MLS in its youth has not been able to be competitive yet with the rest of the world. But don't count America out. We will invest what we need to invest. Young people like you are going to see what it's like to be a young professional. We're signing young players on the men's and the women's side who are competing in a professional environment that we didn't have in the past. We have 30 player development facilities. Some of them are among the best in the world. Those facilities didn't exist 10 years ago, so you can't create, the success without creating the foundation. And that's what I think a problem with sport. Everybody expects you just got to come here and win a Super Bowl. It happens down here. Sasho knows that. Every day humping it and working hard and doing what you need to do, and that's what we'll do with MLS Next. I'm confident that we'll get better, and I hope I'm around to see that happen.
Hello, Commissioner and John. My name is Nolan. I am a sophomore here at the Merrill College of Journalism at the University of Maryland. And my question sort of ties back to the foundation of MLS. I know in the statement regarding the calendar, MLS spoke about the desire to sort of blend the global game with North American tradition. There are other aspects of MLS, some that we see from the outside, such as the playoffs or the lack of promotion relegation, and some more internal, such as the shared ownership stakeholder style that MLS has, and the salary cap, the designated player system, that have really made MLS stand out on the world stage. How do you feel that structurally you are able to balance the foundations of what the league has been with potentially changing some of these very MLS procedures in a way that would further align yourself with the European leagues or other major soccer?
Am I allowed to say that was a good question?
Yeah, go ahead. Not quite as good, though, right?
Yeah, no, you have it, buddy. You really do. There are a lot of things that go into being the North American version of the global game. And the global game started, there are great movies about this, in the grassroots and companies in England that, coal miners, and they started playing football, and it grows up, and then they eventually established the Premier League, and et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the economics of global football, it's not nearly as stable as the economics in Major League Soccer. 19 of the top, I get this right, 19 of the top 50 most valuable teams in the world are MLS teams. And there's a reason for that. Good governance, owners who are partners, a focus on investment in infrastructure. I had a number of friends that invested in Roma, a very famous bunch of guys that many of them now have come in to invest in Major League Soccer. And I joked with them one day, I said, the last stadium that was built in Rome was the Colosseum. And we're putting up 3 stadiums in the next 3 years for several $1 billion in investment because of the way we operate our system. So promotion relegation is fun and it's sexy, and there's another league, minor league, that's creating a promotion and relegation system. All leagues have debt, all local teams have debt. If you don't have debt, you can't run a business. And we're trying to invest in better player development, better youth development, better facilities, and on and on and on. You can't do that without having public-private partnerships, banking facilities. Now, how would you guarantee that if one day your team is really not performing well and playing in a lower division that today can't support that? I remember saying famously many years ago on Men in Blazers, imagine if, New York was relegated and had to play against a certain city, and it turned out that city had a great lower division team, and the mayor called me out in the newspaper, and I had to call him up and apologize publicly on radio. So I'm not going to diminish what could happen in the future. Maybe there's a time when the whole ecosystem works where that can make sense, but it has to make sense. I'm constantly confronted with teams that are underwater in Europe. The best top teams are underwater. They're getting their points taken away because they're not satisfying their obligations to creditors. That's not happening in pro sports in North America, which is why Phil Anschutz and Kraft and the great new investors that have come into MLS, and some of them are the best and brightest minds in business, because it's a long-term investment, or else nobody's going to invest long-term. Just won't happen.
That's such an interesting answer to me, because like you mentioned the top teams. It has little to do with promotion relegation, because some of the top teams are not going to be relegated.
Right, and they've been talking about a system where they'll never get relegated, right? So from strength to strength. So I'm a big fan. I love the idea of playoffs. We all live here. Playoffs matter. Playoffs drive. We had a 30% lift over our regular season in playoffs. That's because that's the way the North American fan is conditioned. Maybe that changes. And if it changes, MLS is nimble enough to change. Now, that's one thing that I've reminded everybody. The worst thing that you could happen is get stuck in the ideas that you had in the past, and you've got to get focused on making the decisions, risky decisions at times, and be able to have the courage to change. If not, you'll fail.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Hello, Commissioner. Again, thank you very much for being here. My name is Jack Suzanne, and I just graduated from here in May. I live in Philadelphia now. My question is about Sum, and Sum and U.S. Soccer ended their commercial rights partnership back in 2022. However, in joint statements, both parties said that the relationship would, quote, continue to be a priority. What does that relationship look like now, and what is Sum doing for this next summer to prepare for that?
So this a little bit inside soccer, right? Soccer United Marketing is a marketing company that we created many, many years ago, and it's a good thing almost to end on, John. I'm gonna talk on Thursday about the difference between where soccer in America is today versus where it was in '94. There was no commercial market for soccer in America. FIFA could not sell the English language World Cup rights for the 2002 and 2006 World Cups. Korea, Japan, and Germany, it wouldn't have been on television. So we're a bunch of smart young folks, and we said, we'll buy them. And we went out, and I went to our owners and said, it's a little crazy, but let's go to FIFA. We'll buy those rights. We'll put them in a company, and we'll monetize those rights. And that's when John Skipper started at ESPN. John was a big fan, and I had met him at a restaurant and said, John, I got good news for you. You're a soccer fan. The better news is you can buy the World Cup. But by the way, you got to buy MLS, and you got to buy U.S. Soccer. And that company then had to hire people. We sold the ads. We sold sponsorships around it. It created a relationship with us with FIFA. It was highly capitalized. It still remains a profitable company. And rather than having 20 different properties, all who had no commercial intellectual property value, we rolled them up like a traditional roll-up. And then as those companies get more successful, have the capacity to hire their own people, like U.S. Soccer has done, they then can stand on their own. And we have evolved that, no different than IMG has evolved that. You don't have representation agreements forever. You create a market, and then that market basically is handed over to the shareholders, and they can go do their thing. The good news is the United States is the single most important and valuable commercial soccer market in the entire world. That's why Gianni moved here. That's why the World Cup is here. That's why the Club World Cup is here. That's why we have $21 billion in team values, and that was created from scratch. So the U.S. soccer thing to me is great. I've been on their board for 26 years. So I'm a big fan of the national team, and it's part of my red, white, and blue blood. But the representation agreement is over, and they couldn't be doing a better job. They hired good people. Their head of commercials used to run commercial for MLS. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Can you take one final question?
I'm leaving here to go to D.C.
That
I just
guy
feel
has
bad
had
for
a,
Cobi and Taylor, saying, when's this guy going to start talking?
This questioner has had his hand up the entire time.
I ask you this as a fan, not as a media. I know we're all media people. I ask you this purely. I could write articles on, how much I, don't like Roger Goodell and your buddies, but I'm not going to do that. I'm asking this purely as a fan. I think that as a fan, you guys run a business, and I think I want to invest in that business as a fan. I want to get. I'm just now getting into soccer. I'm just now getting into it. I want to be a fan. What can I trust that the MLS is going to do in the future? Because you guys have done great things. I mean, not everybody brings Messi. Not everybody brings Ibra. This is, honestly, it's all you, and it's all you guys, and it's fantastic. But I want to be able to trust, because I look at, these big teams might be in debt, but they still have supporters who will literally, and I mean literally, die for their club. And I'm not saying we should have that in America. I'm just saying, what makes me, I want to trust the MLS. Give me your elevator pitch, kind of, for why I should trust the MLS.
That's awesome. I consume a lot of media, as people, I think we all do, right? That's why we're all here. I saw something on the train down where a San Diego FC fan, for their playoff game, shaved his head and had the SDFC logo on his head. I had and Steve Goff will get a kick out of this, I had a guy work in our creative group, and when the Metro Stars were taken over during our transition, we had reorganization by Red Bull. He had a Metro Stars logo tattooed on his leg, and he came in and said, "Commissioner, I'm quitting." And I said, "You're really going to quit?" He said, "Well, I'm not going to take my tattoo off. You got to connect and believe in your local team. And if your team," we had an ad campaign, I believe in Major League Soccer, and it was an aspirational marketing claim. Our teams have to earn that from you. And in Miami, we have our highest ticket price, and that's a controversial thing, but on the secondary market, it's higher than any MLS Cup we've ever had, and it's still a number of days before, because the team really matters. And by the way, it mattered before they had Messi. If you go to a game in Cincinnati, if you go to a game in Columbus, which had a lot of challenges, and now has a season ticket, sold out at every game, the team works hard to connect in the community with fans and puts a product on the field that they believe in. And if they deliver that, you're a fan. If they don't, they lose you. That's the great thing about sports. You can't fake it. You got to earn it every single day. And I believe that you'll be, hopefully DC United gets back to their glory days. Dave Johnson is here. He remembers what that was like back in the early days. And you couldn't get a ticket. They were packing RFK. They would be, welcomed at the White House, and they got to earn it. And if you live here, they got to earn it here. And if you move to New York, there's going to be 2 beautiful stadiums there, and they got to earn it by winning and showing you that they deserve your support. There you go.
All right, I cannot wait for this next panel. Don Garber, thank you very much.
Awesome.
We're going to get a couple more chairs on the stage for our next panel, and then we're going to get our next panelists up there. I will say that we have a full house, as you can see. We got a couple people waiting for chairs, so if you have chairs next to you, yeah, please, we've got lots of chairs over here. So if you're over here waiting, make your way this way, and we'll help you find some. All right, guys, again, if you want some seats, don't be shy about taking them in the middle. And we're going to get ready to get started with our second panel. Introducing our second panel is going to be another one of our students who is attending our London soccer trip, and we are very excited to have her. So Mira, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mira Baynart, and I'm a senior journalism and public health double major from Gaithersburg, Maryland, and I'm very happy to introduce our second panel. First, I'd like to start with Sasho Cirovski, the head coach of our Maryland men's soccer team. Go Terps. Next, we have Stephen Goff, a soccer writer for Yahoo Sports. Our next panelist is Cobi Jones, the all-time leader in caps for the U.S. men's national team and a soccer broadcaster. Next, we have Taylor Twellman, a Maryland Athletics Hall of Famer, 2005 MLS MVP, and a soccer broadcaster. And finally, our moderator, UMD alum, Emily Olsen, the head of Global Women's Soccer for The Athletic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. I really appreciate the introductions. I also want to thank John and Commissioner Garber for doing the business and the finance, because I was a journalism major and an English concentration, so I am not going to touch on that. But what I do want to talk about is the storytelling and the culture that has been going on with this sport. And I really wanted to start with 1994. I mean, if you wanted to go back to the most successful U.S. men's performance, you'd have to go back to the 30s, but I think we have time for 94. So I think just to get going, one thing that someone told me, actually many people have told me about soccer from the first day that I started covering Sasho's team as a student here, was that soccer is a global game, but it's a small world. And I think this panel in particular demonstrates that. So I hope that we kind of get a picture of that as we go along. But I will start with Goff. We'll start with you. Going back to 94, what was soccer in America during that time?
Soccer was growing. Soccer had a presence, but completely unlike today. There was a level of sophistication, but much smaller, much more concentrated. There was an appreciation for the international game, but there was no pro game here at a high level. The NASL had gone under in the mid-'80s. There was some semi-pro leagues, but a lot of it at that point was college soccer. And a lot of the players, or most of the players, for the 1990, 1994 U.S. World Cup teams came through the college system. So, you know, if you wanted to go see a big soccer game in your community at that time, most of it was NCAA stuff. So very different from what it was now. There was not nearly as much visibility of the worldwide game. You know, you'd have to watch matches on tape on Home Team Sports, which was the predecessor to some of the other regional networks here. It just wasn't, there wasn't the availability to it. So when the World Cup was announced, it was coming here, you knew it was going to have a large effect on the sport. How much so really was kind of a mystery. We didn't know. There was promises of MLS coming along, but it hadn't started yet. The national team was making progress, but was still light years behind most of the big countries around the world. So we were kind of on a precipice at that point. And it was kind of the great unknown. It was a big event coming to the U.S., so big events in the United States, whether it's an Olympics or a World Cup or a World Championship of any kind, is going to sell. And the World Cup sold with major numbers. But what would be the legacy? What would be the lasting impact? That's what we wondered about.
Yeah, I think that's why I open with the question too, because we hear all the time that this 2026 World Cup is going to be the biggest in so many ways, whether it's media, attention, number of games, geographical landscape. But I think it's important to go back and think about 94, and I'll get to you, Sasha, in a minute. But Cobi and Taylor, I want to know what it was like as a young player, looking to be professional, 94.
Cobi played.
Exactly. I was going to get there. I was going to start.
Hang on. It turned into Real World for Cobi Jones on MTV, didn't it?
There you go.
There you go.
I don't know how much real world you want to talk about, Cobi, but if you want to take us back.
It was really good. Those are the stories we want.
1994 and being a part of that tournament, what is your lasting memory of it? How would you describe it?
Epic is probably a great word, you know, to use now, but, you know, just a lot of what was said, you have to understand to really take it in where soccer was at that time, where all of us, yes, living in it at the time, had a passion for it, loved the game, but we knew you go outside the soccer pitch, you go anywhere, everyone's like, what do you do? What soccer, what's that? You know, there truly was a lot of that, of what's that sport, how is it played, you know, during that time. I was only seeing, you know, professional soccer matches at the local restaurant, paying $10, going into a back room, and you're seeing it on a bad satellite where you got the lines going through. That's where it is in comparison to now and what you see. So to have the World Cup coming and being a part of that, you know, obviously it was an extreme and difficult period of just the build-up, you know, to that time, especially for all the players to say, am I going to make it? Am I going to be a part of it? And
we also have to give credit where credit's due. We talk about 94, but we wouldn't also have 94 if 1990 didn't come about and actually get our first steps into the World Cup in I don't know how many years. And so that whole process for all the players, and that's the best way that I can give it, was extremely difficult going into a situation of training together day in and day out, trying to not only make the team, but the onus was on all of us as well to build the game and to give notice to everyone that the World Cup was coming. People have to understand as well that, yes, within the soccer world, everyone knew it was coming, and yes, we know it as an event, but to really know it, you had to fall in love with the players. You had to fall in love with the stories and everything that came about, and that's why our jobs were more than just playing on the field. It was going out and promoting this game and promoting the team as much as possible, day in and day out. Things that, as you know, Taylor, those players now, they would never do. The things that we were doing every single day. So it was a pleasure to be a part of it. It was work, and it was a lot of sacrifice.
How much do you think that carry? I mean, for many, many years, and whether it's still true now is up for debate, but that grit, that definition of
There's
grit.
still a chip on his shoulder if you can't hear it.
And I'm curious, how did that play into how you guys were playing on the field? How did it transcend?
Look, I think everyone's seen the news over the past few months when we talk about the older generation versus the current generation, and a lot of it is about that. You want to see the grit, you want to see that fight, that battle that's on the field, and a lot of that, it comes to that older generation because that's really all we had, so to speak. I mean, a perfect example, I wasn't the most technical player, especially in my early days when, my high school coach was the football coach, so I wasn't being taught a whole lot on that side until I really got to college, with the late, great Ziggy Schmid started, making those demands upon me. So a lot as that continued to go beyond college into the Olympic team, into the national team, it was the baseline had to be grit. The baseline was grit because we knew that we had to fight every single game, that we weren't getting respect no matter where we went. We weren't getting respect in Europe. We weren't getting respect in Asia. We certainly weren't getting respect in South America or Central America. Even in our own conference, we weren't getting any type of respect. So it was, as Taylor said, yes, a chip on the shoulder was for everybody to say, okay, we are going to make something special happen. We are going to be something beyond what everybody expects, because when the world's against you, you naturally are going to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. And through that brought that togetherness, of the group, where we were willing to fight for each other on that field.
Emily, you used the word grit. I just want to chime in here. There's a sense that this generation passed down. Now, you got to remember, I came from an NASL family. The Diplomats, I had a jersey in my house growing up, right? The Whitecaps are playing an MLS Cup. My father remembers Soccer Bowl in 1979. But for the 12 to 13 to 14-year-old that watched the 94 World Cup, and then I get to compete against Cobi, and for those of you keeping track, Cobi beat me in 2 MLS Cups. I just want to beat Cobi before he says it. But the point of what I'm saying is that everyone uses the word grit. It diminishes what it really is. It's responsibility. You are responsible as a pro athlete in our sport to play for your country. And you're responsible, as my father raised me the right way and my mom, to respect the elders. So when I came into the national team and my man Cobi was on his way out, I knew I had to be responsible. And by being responsible, that's commitment, it's grit, it's all those other words. But that's the real word that has to come with soccer in our country, because you are responsible for helping the sport grow. And that's where the 94 World Cup, we all bust their chops now, because that generation still has a chip on their shoulder the size of Mount Everest. But that's who made them. That gave me a chance to do what I want. That gives Christian Pulisic a chance to do what he wants. But I hate when the word grit comes out, because it's as if they didn't know how to play soccer. Every single one of those guys I would have had on my team in 2 seconds. Why? Because they were responsible in their commitment to playing for the red, white, and blue. And that you can't teach. It's learned, but you can't teach, because it's either got to be inside or that person has it, and this guy had it in spades. And that generation had it to a point now where I look at the 26 team, you're going to agree with me. I sense it. They can believe it right now. The last 2 months, all of a sudden, they look around and say, uh-oh, pressure's here. We've got to deliver. They delivered. And they delivered in a different way that turned into MLS Cup and all of that. But I hope we don't forget and stop using the word as if it was just 24 high school football players that decided to play soccer that showed up on a field. They were a lot better than we give them credit for.
Yeah, I think that responsibility aspect is crucial in all soccer, whether it's the men's or women's game. There's that responsibility of this is a global game and it's time to make it ours. This is also, Taylor is in TV now, and you can tell because he asked the question that I was going to ask him, so I don't have to ask him a question now. So I'm going to go back to Sasho. In 1994, I believe you were at Maryland for a year at that point, and I want to touch on what Steve said at the beginning about how a lot of these players were built in the college game. Can you share the memories and what college soccer looked like from 93 to 94 and just after that?
First of all, thanks, Emily. Great to be here. First, I want to congratulate Taylor, who finished up his degree last year, so congratulations to Taylor. Made a promise to his mom. He kept it, came back, and this is just a wonderful group, and there's so much history, so much intertwined life. So let me, before I get to 94, it was great listening to Don Garber out here for MLS 3.0. As we get ready for the 2026 World Cup and the next sort of fuel injection into soccer in this country, we do need to talk a little bit about what Steve talked about. So let me take you down quick memory lane. In 1984, I was at Wisconsin, Milwaukee as a player. We had a coach named Bob Ganser who took over that team. He told me that Chicago Sting, Willie Roy coach, was going to draft me after the fall season. I was excited because at 19, I passed an opportunity to stay in Europe and play for a guy named Alex Ferguson because I believed in this college soccer thing and I believed in the future of soccer in America. Well, in August, on the eve of our preseason in 1984, NASL folded. And from 1984 until 1994, this was a difficult, dark time where pioneers, coaches, players that loved the game had to really challenge themselves. I did sign a pro contract in 1985 for $800 a month. $800 a month with the Milwaukee Wave. Then I went to Canada and played in the Canadian Soccer League because they had qualified for the 1986 World Cup. And they had a league, and I played in that league. And at 24, I became player coach. I was trying to survive. I was trying to stay in the game of soccer. I got an MBA in 1989, and I was offered a really good job at Northwestern Mutual Life. And the VP, a guy named Jim Ehrenstrom, asked me, he says, "What do you dream about doing? When you wake up, what do you think about?" I said, "Before I go to bed, I think about soccer. When I wake up, I think about soccer. And all day long, I think about soccer." I had a chance to be an assistant coach to Bob Gansler for $3,000 a year. I took it because that's what I love to do, because I knew there was a future in this game. Bob Gansler coached the team to qualify for the 1990 World Cup with a bunch of college players, a whole bunch of UCLA players. Paul Caligiuri scores the goal. We qualify for the 1990 World Cup. We go in Italy, and we play Italy almost even. And all of a sudden, it's growing. In 1994, the World Cup comes here. 93, I got the job here at Maryland. The first thing we had was Brazil needed a place to train because they were playing Germany in a pregame at RFK Stadium. Steve, you covered the game. And all of a sudden, the excitement of 94, it was through your veins. It was the biggest drug you could possibly have, and I don't know what that's like. But it was unbelievable. I got to be on the field of all the games at RFK. We made it to the second round. Thank you. We put ourselves on the map, but that's when MLS came to fruition. Now, college soccer for that 10-year period kept things alive. The College Cup was a big deal. We're selling out. People were hopping fences. We kept it alive. It was the glue that kept soccer going in this country. And when MLS started to take off, it was a dream for all of us. We had players could go make a living playing soccer. Coaches could find jobs in it. And to see where we are now 30 years later with MLS 3.0, I can't be more excited about the future of the professional game in this country. We had, in 1994, 4 teams in the U.S., 4 teams that were professional teams. 3 were in Canada. There was 4 here. It's called the APSL. We have 92 professional teams today. Men's professional teams, not counting the NWSL. 92 professional teams in 30 years. Just think about that. That's an amazing place. And I do think MLS 3.0, I do believe MLS will be the greatest league in the world sometime in the next 30 years. Okay? I truly believe that. Because this is the place the world wants to come and play. And I'm excited to see all that. Now, when I got here in 93, I was so lucky that Washington was going to host a World Cup, unlike this time around, which is still really very, very upsetting for all of us in this room, that we will not have the opportunity to host. But yeah, just another quick story. My first game as a college coach, 1991, at University of Hartford. This guy's playing for UCLA. We had them tied 1-1 until the 80th minute, and Cobi spins around 3 guys, crosses the ball, and they beat us in that game. So our lives are so intertwined. So it's just
He was
wonderful.
shooting it. He wasn't crossing it.
Wow, yeah. They had some big boys that could head the ball. So.
Well, I think that's a great, again, a demonstration of the highs and lows and the responsibility that I think everyone on this stage has bore for the sport and where it is now. But 94 wasn't a perfect moment. It did start 96 in MLS, but then there's a time between MLS 1.0 and 2.0 that was a very dark time for the league, and there was questions. I think I guess, Steve, I'm going to go back to you to set it up, but after the high of 94 and 96, there was the 1998 World Cup and then the early 2000s. What were some of the early hardships that men's soccer went through professionally?
MLS was in trouble. I mean, Don would give a more definitive answer, but it seemed like it was close to going under. There were a couple owners who were deeply invested in the league and kept it afloat. But if they had pulled the plug, it was done. Anschutz and Kraft, the Hunt family. And it wasn't really gaining traction. The number of teams had diminished. There weren't any new stadiums going in. Columbus had opened one and a few others, Home Depot Center in LA. But it was struggling. They weren't, it was kind of treading water about, do we invest in major players? Do we want to put forward that money when we're not generating the revenue to support it? TV was a challenge. So, it was kind of dark. It was very uncertain. And soccer, and the NASL, for all its successes, only lasted, 17 years, I think. MLS is now at 30 and counting. So they found their way, but it was in great danger, for sure.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Cobi. I didn't mention UCLA for a reason, because we are at Maryland, but you did have success there, and then LA Galaxy, you won cups there as well. Again, we're near DC, so
Against Taylor.
I was against Taylor. But during that, you talked about the responsibility you felt at the national team in 1994. Did you feel the same during the early parts of MLS as a player as well?
Yes, without a doubt. I think people have to remember part of the whole deal, there wasn't just a deal between U.S. Soccer and FIFA. There was also a deal between U.S. Soccer and the players. That's why you saw in the early years of MLS, a lot of the players that were in Europe already ended up coming back to help establish this league and have like the big American name that was, and you were actually, put on different teams. That's why you saw it spread out. Eric Ronaldo was up in San Jose, I was in LA, you put the players all over the place. So there was a responsibility from the early years, until my retirement. I think there was a continued as Taylor said, just a thought that you have to be responsible, as he said, to the national team, but also to the league, to try to get this going, to see it through with the ups and the downs, that we had. Because as I was there seeing the contraction of the league, there was a talk amongst a lot of the players, what's going to happen next, and then what are you going to do? So yes, there's a significant panic and a lot of thought of, and thanks, to those owners, because they did see us through, those hard times. But the responsibility was there, and we knew it. And as I mentioned, there was a lot that we did for the national team. It was almost, carbon copy that, for the individual clubs within MLS to continue to work and do the things that were necessary to make sure that this league survived. And I know, I actually look out here and there's a few people here from the early days of the league, and they know exactly what I'm talking about, that we were, I can speak from the Galaxy's perspective, that we were out after every single practice, after practice, going to do clinics, going to do appearances, driving an hour to 2 hours and then doing a 2-hour clinic and then driving 2 hours back in traffic. That was the norm, back then. You would never see that, today, but that's a little bit of the idea of that thought of, I could never have thought myself saying, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to help out. I'm not going to. I mean, this was my livelihood, and it's a livelihood for everybody else, and it was help building the game. So I was willing to do whatever it takes, the interviews and everything in the after hours to make sure that the league survived. So yes, there was grit. amongst all,
well,
amongst
he can
all
say
those
grit.
guys.
I can't
yeah.
say grit.
Okay.
No, you can't say it. I can't, but he can.
During all those early years, within MLS as well.
You know what's interesting, Emily, is I grew up, my grandfather played 19 years pro baseball, 11 in the majors. And I'm bringing this up because there's a similarity here to where when he passed away in 2006, he was still getting checks from the Players Union. And he was talking about laying the foundation. He worked for the parish in the offseason. He had 2 jobs. He played left field for the Yankees, won 2 World Series. He worked in the offseason. And then the union got together, and then the CBA gets together, and then Alex Rodriguez signs for the Texas Rangers for $250 million over 10 years. He's sitting at the dinner table, and he goes, holy shit. Someone's making $25 million of playing the sport. But there was a sense of pride. I'll never forget that day. And that's what Sasho's talking about. That's what Stephen Goff's talking about. That's Cobi. You don't know it in the time because we're all like, really, you want us to drive an hour to wherever you need us to go to do these appearances. But now I sit here at 45, and I see Americans making over $1 million in Major League Soccer, where there's over 72 players making over $1 million to play in the league, that Cobi and I, less than 20 years ago, were playing the same team 8 times a year because we couldn't figure out a schedule. Yeah. That's what they did. There's now, when I reflect on that, that's when you know the arms of this family tree are now getting longer. And and if he was sitting here, I'd say the same thing. Don Garber came in, and he had to be bold, he had to be brash, he had to be very stubborn. And when David Beckham showed up, this guy knows this better than I because he was in the building. When Beckham showed up, all of a sudden, and I think you'll agree with me, there was a different vibe to everything in the league. And I'm not saying because David Beckham was an MLS player in Us Weekly, but I am saying it because of that. Because now all of a sudden everybody was like, wait a minute, hold on a minute. Conan O'Brien, we played the LA Galaxy at Gillette Stadium, and they sold 45,000. Conan O'Brien, the night before in his live show for 10 minutes, talked about David Beckham and his jokes and all of that. All of a sudden, that was the moment. And I didn't know it then because I was playing. The only thing I cared about was winning. But now when I hear and see it from this point, and the reason why it's MLS 3.0 is Lionel Messi's doing the exact same thing times 1 billion. Opening game of Inter Miami, there were 25,000 in the parking lot just to get a glimpse of him getting off the team bus. And so that's where the struggles of Sasha making $3,000 a year to coach, we all had to believe that this was coming. We had to. Otherwise, what's the point? But that's what dreaming is for. But Sash, you and I talked about this when you were recruiting me.
Yeah,
My grandfather would talk about baseball in the sense that now all of us in this room go, no way they did that.
Well, Taylor, your recruiting story is a good story as well because Taylor was a big-time athlete, everything. He's a scratch golfer. He was a prospect for baseball. The Kansas City Royals offered Taylor a contract.
You almost ripped my head off when I told you I might take that job, but thanks. Let's relive that.
But in the context of what was happening during the time, so this is 1997. I'm recruiting Taylor. He came in as a freshman in '98. At that point, our team had just beaten Virginia and won our first AC title. We put ourselves on the map. Taylor's first year, we get to the College Cup. But he had to make a difficult decision because baseball was where the money was. This was America's pastime. This is where the money was. And MLS has just started in 1996. And I had to convince Taylor that you got to follow your heart. And I actually asked him to play both soccer and baseball here. Came on a baseball scholarship first semester. But he was a special talent. He was a forward we hadn't seen in our country probably since Brian McBride. And he took a chance here. He came and he played soccer here. And he made the under-20 World Cup. Then he became the bronze boot, the third leading scorer in the under-20 World Cup. And he had opportunities in Europe, opportunities in MLS. But that was a hard time. I mean, MLS starting salary was $24,000 a year. And that's what it was when he was coming out. And I did the math with Taylor and tried to tell him not to go. I said, Taylor, when you pay your rent and you gotta,
that's why I finished school at 45.
You gotta do this stuff. You said you're in debt, brother. You're in debt. Your scholarship's taking way better care of you. But
the money's keeping players in the game, and that is a big difference from even 10, 15 years ago. I mean, there's a lot of guys. And Cobi will remember this players probably he played with who gave up the sport because they could go out and use their college degree for other things. The money is there. There was at one point the numbers for the contract started to leak out.
Yes.
And I remember putting it in the newspaper, and one of the younger players came up to me and said, "My girlfriend broke up with me because she just saw my earnings." And he was half joking.
I have a sneaky suspicion I know which player said that to you, too.
And so now, I mean, money makes a big difference. You can make a living, and you can make a very good living playing the sport.
But also, I thought the Bethesda youth player had a great question earlier, and I almost chimed in because I never know when to shut up. But everyone in the world now knows Christian Pulisic makes $15 million. And what everyone talks about is, oh, well, what does that have anything to do with it? Has a lot to do with it. Because there's a 12-year-old kid that had the same opportunity that I could have had, go into the minor leagues baseball, play basketball, whatever. Now all of a sudden it's flipped the script. He's also the best player in the last 2 years in Serie A. So we can debate the development question all we want, and that's a different topic. I'll argue we're developing at a faster rate than anyone else, and I know you agree with me when the rest of the world has had a 100-year head start on us. I digress. But the point is, in order to resonate, in order to be in this, I've got to have Tony Romo at a golf tournament come up to me and ask me for 5 minutes on what Inter Miami is. Tony Romo and the Dallas Cowboys quarterback was not asking Cobi Jones in 1996 or 2002. It's flipped because the younger generation right now, they all play, but unlike Cobi, Sasho, Steve, Taylor, and a lot of us in this room, we couldn't watch any Premier League game we wanted. We didn't know what the rest of the world looked like.
I want to talk about that, though, because one, we're running short on time, and two, because there's a flip side of this, and I think it got brought up in a lot of the questions for Commissioner Garber's panel, which is there's a responsibility aspect and there's an inferiority feeling. And that, American soccer, U.S. soccer is not just a national team, it's not just MLS, it's fans that are watching, teams from where their family's from, or they're just watching Premier League, and the more access there is, the more the audience's eyeballs go other places. So I am curious how, Taylor, you're now in the media side of it, especially, what is that inferiority complex? How does it make it different?
It's held us back, Emily. It's a great question. It's held us back for a long time. I've been doing this now 15 years, and I will say the only thing I will ever brag about is I got Scott Van Pelt, John Anderson, and all these SportsCenter anchors that had nothing to do with it sit in that room the night the United States was trying to qualify for the World Cup. And all of a sudden, if they were cartoons, light bulbs would have.
We all saw your response that night.
Yes. But my point was, Scott's hooked. About 75% of those guys text me all the time. Part of our part of our issue with always feeling like a little brother is we were very exclusive with how we do this. And we made fun of people that use different terminology and wrong terminology. And we made fun of them. Gus Johnson, if you've never read his article and heard his podcast, talk about this. He was the voice of the Champions League. Now, on one hand, I say, hang on a minute, dude. After 2 months of doing it the wrong way, I hosted SportsCenter 200 times. You can figure out pronunciations. You can figure out certain things if you really care. On the other hand, though, what I realized was in order for me to get in that room and get them interested, I had to stop making fun of them. Now, I am unequivocally the least soccer guy in the soccer world because I am 100% unapologetically American, and I love all sports. You could put me right now in a golf tower, and I'll commentate that for 4. I just love it. But we got to get us into that. And I'm glad you used that because that is where it's now all of the sudden changing. And it is because the Premier League, and it is because of La Liga, and it is because we're exposed to the higher leagues in the world. But if you still come to me with the answer or the questions that I heard tonight and stuff, you're not paying attention. Don Garber said the number, I'll give you the exact number. Exports of $241 million worth of players. Do not come to me and say MLS isn't on par with the rest of the world. That's complete. First off, that's business-wise, that makes no sense. $241 million of exports in the last 18 months. That's absurd. If Cobi and I would have said that 15 years ago, everyone would have thought we're out of our coconut. So there's still this problem that everyone talks about, well, MLS isn't doing this. Yes, everyone's got our flaws. MLS has its flaws. It's changing its schedule. I would have bet my life on it that they would have never changed the schedule. Now they are.
Yeah. Actually, I do want to give...
$241 million worth of players in our league.
It's
and yet
huge.
someone wants to tell us...
How much was it?
I didn't hear it.
Goff, when was the last time you'd ever think about that?
More than 24,000.
But you mentioned the calendar. I think it's important to get into it because I think there's another calendar that someone on this panel would like to talk about.
Thanks, Emily.
I know. I covered you as a student. I followed you forever. I think you have always been talking about the calendar. There are important dates coming up in January and March. We just saw MLS make a switch that makes sense, as Garber said, to the growth of their league. Can you talk about the importance of a split calendar in college soccer?
It'd be awesome if they do it.
And also, we're running out of time.
Well, I got 1 minute. Hey, I've been here 33 years, so people can hang around for a few minutes. So just hang tight. So look, ever since I became a player back in 81 to 84 at UWM, and all the years I've been in college coaching, I've always been very frustrated with the calendar. I mean, the same things that Don pointed to is in college sports, you're judged by the quality of your championship. If your championship is important, your sport is important. And our championship is stuck in the first 2 weeks of December. And as Don said, at this point, we have MLS Cup going on. You got college basketball, you got college football, you got the NFL, NHL, NBA, every other 3-letter or 4-letter acronym of a sport is going on at the same time. And the weather's bad. I played in 9 college cups. And I think there's been only 2 that have been decent weather. One was in Dallas and one was in Santa Barbara. Unfortunately, there's not much college soccer in Dallas and nobody watched. And in Santa Barbara, if they're not playing, nobody's watching. So in the places that we could have had big crowds, you're just trying to survive out there. So it was just stupid. And what we've seen now in college sports, in the way the college sports is sort of, evolving or reshaping, is there was a problem in college sports. They didn't really care much about too many sports unless there was a lawsuit or money involved or gender equity. And I started the challenge in 2014, 12 years ago, to shift the season for the same reasons Don's talking about right now, because we want to decompress have more time between games. Want to get rid of most midweek games, play on weekends. Want to have a championship in May, have May mayhem after March Madness, and not the silliness we have right now of trying to survive. Thankfully, Saturday should be decent weather, so make sure you're there. But look, our goal is to beat MLS to the punch. So we're trying to get this for the 26-27 season. And think about that. Think about the alignment that is possible now. MLS will go to a full year from August until May in the 27-28 season. The World Cup will happen this summer. I want the bump of the World Cup for the college season starting the 26-27 season. Now, things have changed positively for us in a good way. U.S. Soccer has leaned in with influence, with power, with financial investment. They've leaned in a big, big way. They formed a committee to help support us. They made statements to support us. MLS is supporting, everybody's supporting, and all of you are supporting. Everybody in the whole world knows it's the right thing to do. Now, the pathway is much clearer than it ever was. It used to be you get a proposal, and you have to go through 18 committees who didn't give a shit about soccer, and then you'd have to fight like crazy, and a number of times I've had doors slammed to me or had been scolded for pushing so hard. Will be in a book at some point. But the point is, in January, we're going to have a proposal. In March, there'll be a vote. If this passes, we'll be playing the split season this year, following the World Cup, and then leading into MLS. Imagine where we are today in soccer compared to where we were in 94 or 84. That young man from Bethesda that asked the question, young people right now, you're the luckiest people that ever kicked a soccer ball in the history of our great country, because you have more opportunities, you have more investment, you have more resources than Taylor and Cobi and myself and everyone else had. And we are right now at the precipice of a soccer boom. We're going to get college soccer right. MLS 3.0 is going to be amazing.
They've changed every college sports season except soccer. My father that played in the 74 College Cup, he's the exact same schedule. Also, real quick, if someone gets a concussion on Friday and they're forced to play on Sunday, where's player health? Where's player safety? Where's all of this? They are barbaric. We know who they are on how they treat men and women's soccer. It's simple as that. And by the way, this becomes a great player pathway, part of our climate. And that's where people are completely underestimating, because you get your degree, you still get quality coaches, you still get quality soccer. The fact that we're still talking about this in 2025 is idiotic.
My goal is simple, to make college soccer the destination of every 18 to 23-year-old in the world that is not signed to a first-team deal of a big pro league. We want this to be the destination. I want Bayern Munich to send their best players here that's not playing for the first team, not to play for Bayern too. So this is what we want, the best league in the world, developmental league in the world, because what we do to develop people, not just players. Because if you look at MLS and you look at these guys, they're college graduates, you look at the coaches, people running MLS, people running NWSL, they all played college soccer. They were in college soccer. Emily was a reporter for a college soccer team at Maryland. It's such an important, integral piece of our soccer ecosystem, and I want to make it better, and hopefully we'll do that.
If you recruit Germans over Americans, I'm graduating from somewhere else.
If the young Americans would actually go to college, we'd recruit them all.
All right, I'm gonna give Cobi the last word so that
Good.
Taylor doesn't have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. My ear's hurting over here.
He had the last word in 2005.
That's when we beat him the second time. Okay. Just really quick. I mean, the whole idea of this whole symposium and everything is how we're moving the game forward, right? How we're growing the game of soccer. And we're all here because we love sports, and it's all about sports. So to put it in the sports terms, it's pretty simple. It's about winning and taking the wins when you can. And if you look at the growth of this game, it's no matter what we say, and on the negative side of everything, soccer's still going to grow in this country, but it's how we want it to grow. How quickly can we have it grow? And if you really look at this game through the years, we have these moments, these exponential growth periods, and it usually comes 90 World Cup. Success for the U.S. 94, World Cup. Success for the U.S. '96, the establishment of MLS. You know, let's keep going. '99ers for the women. They have success. Another exponential growth for the game because guess what? Rising tide, all boats, right? This is what happens. And it's continuing to grow. You know, this game will grow. And a lot of it depends on how our national teams do and how we can get the word out about this game in MLS, the NWSL, USL, all these different groups, and the college game as well. And as we've talked about up here about the calendar, it's the college calendar, it's the MLS calendar. Those are wins as well. Those are all going to help this game grow and go to the next level. And now, if things go, I'm going to jump ahead. If we're talking about this next year in the World Cup, if things don't go the way that we want it to, soccer's still going to grow, you know, in this country. People are still going to be paying attention to the game in this country. But just think, if this U.S. team does something along the lines of what we did in '94 or in 2002 and goes beyond even the expectations, well, we'll be talking about a generation of players on the men's side that will have turned themselves into legends. That they will be able to come to a panel 30 years on, and they'll still be talking about what they did on those days. So everyone here, support that team. Give them all the positive vibes that you can give because a lot is riding on it, you know, for all of us. Because if you really want to see the game take that exponential growth, when we're talking about the biggest World Cup ever, being here in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, well, that's the moment. That's the moment.
Nice. I think that's a great place to end. Cool. All right, we are going to take a couple of questions now, so please raise your hand. I do want to just really quickly say that as much as the tree grows and the branches grow, and being back at Maryland reminds me of this, is the roots are important. And like I said, soccer is a global game, but a small world. And it takes showing up and respect, and I know that I did that, but it also takes people like the people on this panel, specifically Stephen and Sasho, who gave me the chance to show that professionalism and be able to do it. So just, it's important to remember those roots and be an active part of that community, because that's how it grows.
Hello, my name is Dash Tischler. I'm a senior here at University of Maryland, and I have a question. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the development of the game in the U.S., but one aspect we maybe haven't talked as much about has been the development in coaching. I'd love to hear all of your opinions, especially Sasho's, on, obviously in recent years, you've seen guys like Jesse Marsh, Bob Bradley, even David Wagner, even if his background's a little bit different, become Americans who are getting big jobs overseas. But how do you feel like you've seen the development path for coaching in addition to players, and in sort of seeing soccer minds in the U.S. become more important in thinking about the game tactically as global leaders of clubs in these big roles? How do you feel like we've seen growth there, and what do you think the future is going to be for them to break further in?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Thanks, Dash. Good question. Yeah, look, I think we're very lucky in this country that we have so many other sports and that we can learn from coaches across all sports. Much of my coaching values and ideology has been shaped by studying not only soccer coaches, but coaches across other sports. And we're so lucky in this country to have guys like Lombardi and Wooden and so many other people that we can study. So we're very lucky. I think we have some of the best coaches in the world. I think just like it takes a little while to get noticed and recognized. I've been around a lot of coaches, international coaches. I've seen a lot of sessions, a lot of training stuff, and I think we do have a little bit of this. It takes a little while for the rest of the world to really notice. Obviously, we've had some guys go over and have some success. Jesse Marsh, I coached Jesse when he was 15 years old in Wisconsin. We're all intertwined and connected. But I could tell his passion and the way that he thinks about things, that you could see that he was going to be a coach one day. And I know he played for Bob Bradley and so forth. Look, I think Siggy Schmidt was Kobe's coach, and Siggy could coach any team in the world, and I feel I could do the same. And we have so many good coaches here that have a skill set that can solve problems. They know how to touch humans. They know how to develop relationships. They know how to move people. They know do different things. And in so much of soccer, that's what it is. There's no timeouts, okay? You have to have the emotional connection. You have to have the principles of how you want to play and do these things. I think it's a matter of time before you start seeing a lot of American coaches coaching some of the biggest clubs in the world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My only thing I would add to, for the first time in 30 years, 4 first-year head coaches all made the conference final in Major League Soccer history. That's massive. Wilfred Nancy was announced as Celtics head coach, manager today. I had dinner with Celtics owner a month ago. They literally have been scouting MLS for coaches. I think that's understated, how MLS all of a sudden, with MLS Next Pro, Cobi's actually been part of a coaching staff. When the level of access and tools that coaches have now, U.S. soccer's exponentially grown in that access. Dash, it's a great question, but it can't just be to the American, because there may be an international coach that's been in our country, like a Wilfred Nancy for years, that used this country and its setup to further itself. But U.S. soccer's coaching education, having done it, is it's really, really good, and I think the rest of the world has already noticed. I think Wilfred Nancy to Celtics says a lot.
Hi, I'm Zion Williams, master's student here, from here as well. My question is, Cobi, you said in the earlier stages of MLS that big U.S. soccer stars who might have been playing abroad came back here to help grow the league. My question is to everybody. Do you think that the fact that we have so many soccer stars playing abroad has hurt the league? And do you think that, we've seen Poch trust a lot of MLSers this year so
and people
far.
on social media hate that right now. It's really a tough pill to swallow.
So where do you think the balance is between, having our soccer stars play here as well as, kind of going abroad?
Well, great question. I'll start it off by just saying this statement. If you notice, the best success that the U.S. national team has in the World Cups is when they have a great balance of players that are playing overseas and players that are coming from MLS. And I would agree with Taylor on the fact that a lot of people haven't liked the fact that some of the MLS players are getting time and doing well, which is insanity to me. It shows to me that Poch coming in here is seeing something in those players, and this is one of the great things. How do you say, Pochettino, you don't know what you're talking about players? He's coached the best, in the world. So if he's seeing something there, it's telling everybody that, at least for me, maybe there were some mistakes in the past that, yes, there are great players that for the U.S. that are playing overseas, but guess what? There's great players here that are playing within MLS. Don't overlook them just because they're here, and I think that it's a good, delicate balance that you have to have where you have players that are playing overseas and players that are playing here, and I think Pochettino looks at it just like, you know what? I'm just getting the good players. Whoever can play well as a team is who I want on the field, because the team wins. An individual that goes up there, yes, you can have the superstar. They're not going to do it by themselves. You have to have your stars, your role players, your physical players, your tall center backs, your crazy goalkeepers. You got to have it all if you're going to be successful in a World Cup.
Yeah, there's definitely an impact on MLS when players sign overseas, but it's a personal decision. There's certainly a mystique to play in Europe, but at the end of the day, there's money, and you're getting what you pay for. If MLS increases its salary cap and increases salaries, players are going to stay, or they're going to come back from other places. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, the money in MLS has gone up, but if you look at the top earners in MLS, they're not Americans.
No, but having someone that the Kraft family, in 2006, full transparency, second largest transfer offer for an American was mine. Kraft looked at me right in the face and said, "You're not going." I was mad at the time, but now I think about it and go, okay, it's a business decision. Why do I bring that up? Tyler Adams scored an unbelievable goal for Bournemouth this weekend. What'd the announcer say? The commentator. Red Bull Academy player. See, and this is why it's where this is how I got into the ESPN talent people to get them bought in. See, around the world, when you develop a player and he moves on, they take pride in that because they know we, in fairness to us, we've got the 4 best leagues in the world in our backyard. So we would never think a Dallas Mavericks player would go play in Prague and be like, yeah, you see what I'm saying? But he scored that goal for Bournemouth. and he brings up the Red Bulls. That's better marketing than anything else you do. So I've never understood why it's always this negativity about development. Yes, of course, we would love to see Christian Pulisic play in our country and in this league, absolutely. But every time he scores a goal for Serie A, they bring up the Philadelphia Union, even though he wasn't part of their academy, but he was part of the setup with Delco and all. You see what I'm getting at? Like, so I get why there's a negative connotation, but then I'm also like, we've got to think clear. Tyler Adams scored. That's awesome. Born and raised in the Red Bulls Academy, played for the Red Bulls, moved on. Weston McKennie, FC Dallas, through and through. You were part of his journey. You're not going to be part of everyone's journey. I don't know. I think sometimes it's always negative, and it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, I think another point to step out wider, because I would be remiss not to bring this up, is if you look at NWSL right now, there's a big conversation going on with Trinity Rodman, right? Because NWSL is still seen as one of the most top-to-bottom competitive leagues in the world. And there's a chance that the Spirit lose their top player because someone can pay more money. And so right now, that league is grappling with the financial, the salary cap aspect of it. And I think what this all says on the men's or women's side of, if you want to try to put it under an umbrella of American soccer, is that you're at the table now, though. Like, you're part of the conversation. You're having to have these challenges not within the borders of the U.S., but you're trying to wonder, going to Rodman, do you have to compete with the Chelsea or an Arsenal in the spending, or is there another way that you can kind of untangle that? So I think if you look, again, on men's or women's, I think it's a positive that the conversation is that your competition and your standards are global at that point.
Jay Sugarman wouldn't agree with me, but I'm going to say it. Kevin Sullivan being named by Man City as the best U15 player in the world. That's not a negative. Just because he's going to Manchester City, that's not a negative. You're going to struggle to convince me that that's a negative. Just because that's unbelievable to say that. So, but I get it. It's you and we all have conversations about, I want the best team on the field for the U.S. men. Social media will tell you otherwise. Because if Sebastian Berhalter was playing in the second division of Spain, there would be a 1,000% different reaction right now to the kind of player that he is. And the kind of player he is right now is because Vancouver and their manager said, you know what, we're going to tap into something different. That's just the reality of what it is in the world that we live in right now.
Well, I want to say something about that and what you mentioned, the money, because that's what it comes down to.
Great question.
Is there a bias, even amongst the American ownership, about the American player? Your response to that?
I mean, the proof is there. Players go where the money is, and if the money were here, and it's an American player, they'll probably stay. So, yeah, certainly that's a.
But why aren't they paying it then? If you can see,
it's a great question.
A talented, like, I guarantee you, Sebastian Berhalter is going to start getting some contacts very quickly.
Already has.
There it is.
Right,
It happens like this.
Would MLS match that? Would they allow? I shouldn't say allow. There is a designated player.
Over the last 4 or 5 years, yes. But what Cobi's raising it's a real question. For Weston McKennie to be part of a conversation with, and I'm not going to name the two teams, for $10 million a year, yeah. But Cobi said something very interesting that has never changed. When you do well with the national team, you get the MLS owner's attention. That still is there. That still is there. Pulisic coming back here, I'll promise you right now, will be the top 3 highest paid players in this league because he is that American at that level. It's changed. We've got an American center back that is now a designated player for FC Cincinnati, making $4 million a year. I would have never thought that was the case 5 years ago. So that's part of the process, but Cobi's 100% right to ask that question.
Yeah, I think that it just shows that the responsibility is
It's a good
now
question, by the way. You should host a podcast.
It's moved beyond the development of the players. The players are good. It's now back into the investment that's going back in. We are way over time, but I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen and my panelists. I appreciate it. Thank you.